Hi and welcome to the Shift is Strong podcast. My name is Frankie. I'm here to give you 5 reasons why you should throw away your tiny dumbbells and start lifting heavy. So if you've listened to my podcast before, you would have heard me talking about heavy lifting, and I really wanted to dedicate a whole podcast to this topic today, especially as people have asked me about the adaptations of the body to heavy lifting, and so I wanted to give you a deeper insight into that element. And also because I see many women who are scared to lift. So it's something I think as women get older, we're scared to hurt ourselves. Perhaps it's a little bit more comforting to lift something that's lighter, that's within your reach. However, I really want to show you why you should try and challenge yourself more. I can understand that it's scary, and of course if you're coming back from injury or you've just had kids, it's maybe heavy lifting isn't for you right now. But I want to show you that in the long term, it's going to be something that's so beneficial to your health as you age, and why perhaps you should start lifting. Okay, so I promised to give you 5 reasons to lift heavy today. I'm going to start off with defining what do I mean by lifting heavy. I actually brought some equipment with me today. So we're going to have a look at my equipment that I've got. So I've got this little tiny dumbbell. Okay, so he's very sweet. But I actually tested earlier how many times I could lift this above my head, for example. And I stopped at 30 because I got bored. So that's what I'm going to be considering as a tiny dumbbell. That one's 1.5 kilos. And then lifting heavy, for example, on that same lift, I also brought a nice heavy kettlebell along today. I'm just going to show you this beautiful beast. Okay, so this is a bit different. This is 16 kilos. I'm not going to try and press it overhead because I'm not warmed up, but you can see the difference. I'm already struggling just to hold it here in this position. So that's more challenging. Okay, so aside from the equipment, what do we mean about lifting heavy? So normally in the world of personal training, you would try to calculate the 1 repetition max of a person on a specific lift. So this is in an ideal world because often when you start training with someone, you're not going to directly test all of their maximum repetitions on a lift. It's not the thing to do because they are not used to training and you will most likely injure them. So you can also have a different way of calculating that. But to give you an idea, for example, if someone was to do a deadlift, so if you know about deadlifts where you're lifting a weight from the floor up to your hips, this is quite a lift where you can lift quite heavy. You may have some women who are trained who can lift 100 kilos, so that could be their 1 repetition max. And so then you calculate a percentage of that repetition max to know if you're at 70% or above of that repetition max. So normally a high intensity, moderate to high intensity lift would be considered about 70% or more of your 1 repetition max. We can also look at it in a different way. So a low intensity lift would be something where you're able to lift that weight at least 15 times. So with the tiny dumbbell I showed you earlier, I'm lifting that 30 times and it's not even wearing me out, and I'm not that strong. Like, I do train, but I haven't trained for years and years. I've trained for about 4 years, and I'm not naturally that strong. So I think for a lot of women that would be easy to do. They would easily get to 30 repetitions on that lift. However, with my 16 kilo kettlebell, I know I can only get 5 repetitions out of that, and I'm really going for it with all of my energy. So I would consider those 5 repetitions higher intensity. It may be more, really probably up to about 6 repetitions would be considered as a moderate to high intensity, and a lower intensity, as I said, 15 or more. You can also base this on how the lift feels. So if you are lifting a weight and the last couple of repetitions feel like they're really heavy and you're really having to push and use all your energy, you wouldn't be able to talk to anyone, you have to concentrate, focus 100% to get that lift, then you're looking at something which is high intensity. So just to give you an idea of how scientific studies have tried to analyze what is high and low intensity, and how you can then have an idea of whether you're lifting with a low, moderate or high intensity if you are already lifting now, or what would be expected for you to get to, what kind of level you would get to if you were to start lifting heavy. Obviously, if you're new to lifting, don't start lifting heavy straight away. You would need to take some time. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on in the podcast. Hi, you're listening to the Shift to Strong podcast by FEB Coaching. My aim is to give women the truth about health and fitness. So in the podcast, I will be using science-backed information and also mixing that with my philosophy and values about training, which I've developed through my personal experience as a personal trainer and training myself. So please bear in mind that science does evolve and opinions do evolve over time. So I'm trying to give you the most up-to-date information and my view at the current time. If you find this content useful, please help spread the word by sharing it with a friend, liking and following the podcast. That would be really, really great. And if you want more information about how to train, please go and look on my website. It's www.feb.com. You also have my Instagram, so it's at feb_coaching. So for more tips and advice, you can find details about the website and Instagram in the podcast description. Thank you, and back to the podcast. Okay, so now we've defined what heavy lifting is. I'm going to talk to you about aging, effects on the body, so you understand then why heavy lifting is going to be important. So just a couple of things as you get older. It's not all doom and gloom, but it's also just how life happens. We change over time. So as you age, you do lose a percentage of your muscle mass each year, a small percentage, and after age 60, it becomes a lot quicker, that muscle mass loss. You can, as a woman specifically, you also then have osteoporosis, which is a lack of bone mineral density. So this can occur specifically during menopause. So women over 60 are specifically prone to osteoporosis, and your bone mineral density will decrease and you will be susceptible to fractures, which can be very dangerous. And there's lots of studies on the danger of fractures in older women and men. Then you have got your nervous system. So as we've seen, the body's just generally getting less efficient. So the same will go for your nervous system. You will generally have slower reflexes. Your coordination and balance will slow down, again, which can lead to falls, becoming less independent, needing help for just daily tasks. So the nervous system is really important in the element of lifting. So to recap, you will lose muscle mass, your bone mineral density will be reduced, your reflexes will be less efficient, and you're more likely to store fat around the belly and be at risk of diabetes. Doom and gloom. So this is where heavy lifting comes in, because heavy lifting can make it all better. Okay, so number one reason that you should start heavy lifting. We talked about the nervous system slowing down, becoming less efficient. When you ask your body to lift heavy as opposed to light, it needs to recruit high threshold motor units. So the motor units are what enable you to move, and the less you use them, the less they are efficient at being used. So when you actually then need them, perhaps to stop yourself from falling suddenly, they're not there. You can't connect to them as quickly. When you lift heavy, you're training that recruitment of those motor units. So, for example, if you were to lift something lighter, okay, so more like less than 50% of your one repetition max, studies have shown that you're actually able to rotate your motor units and you're using lower threshold motor units. So that means that your body can be like, okay, imagine you're in your body there's lots of minions and you're lifting something light. So you've got your light dumbbell. So the minions in there and they're like, okay guys, it's okay, she's got a light dumbbell, we can rotate, let's just rotate, we can just keep going. Little recruitment. However, when you've got your big 16 kilo kettlebell, they're like, okay, everyone, we need everyone in. We need everyone's power and energy to do this. Okay, they can't take a break. They have to work. You're asking your body to generate strength. So it will realize that it needs to be able to do that, and it will adapt to become more efficient. So obviously at the beginning you can be lifting lighter, making sure you've got good form, but as you go along you will have these adaptations. And so in order for your body to continue adapting, you need to keep stimulating it with something more heavy. So that's the idea behind the neural adaptations. So a lot of the time we don't focus on the nervous system, because no one really cares, they can't see the nervous system. However, it's something that's really important for aging independently and feeling healthy and happy for longer. Number 2, we talked about muscle mass. So as you're getting older, you're gradually losing your muscle mass. So you're going to have to work harder to keep building that muscle mass. So studies have shown that you can have muscle mass gains with a lower intensity weight, so about 30% of your 1 repetition max. However, in order to get the same gains as you would get from lifting heavy, so moderate to heavy, more like 70% plus, you would have to go to failure. So that means you have to keep pushing until you cannot get any more repetitions. So we're looking at more like 20, 30 repetitions potentially here. And the problem with going to failure is that, number 1, it's really costly in terms of time. Okay, so a lot of busy mums don't have time to spend hours in the gym. They need quick, efficient workouts. It also leads to a lot more fatigue. So it means that, okay, you're a busy mum and you've got to look after the kids and you've got to run a household and you've got to go to work, but you're exhausted from your training because you're training to failure. It's also going to higher your injury risk, because if you're pushing to failure, you're more likely to compensate to try and get that last lift in. So it's much more likely that you'll injure yourself than if you actually lift heavier for less repetitions, obviously with the correct form. So with muscle mass, you can get benefits from lifting a different range of weights. However, if you're putting it into the context of, I'm a mum, I've got a busy daily life, I've got a job, and I've got, kids to look after, then I would advise you to go for shorter workouts. Personally, I do 3 times per week. My workouts take me about 45 minutes and I come out of my workouts feeling still energetic. I still have to be able to be high energy all day because I am training clients, I am giving classes. So it works really well for me to actually spend less time in the gym, really efficient lifts, working on proper technique, form and heavy lifting, and still having the energy to carry on my activities for the rest of the week. Okay, reason 3, we talked about bone density. So there have been lots and lots and lots of studies on bone density and the impact of training. So lots of the studies focus on postmenopausal women and whether lifting heavier or lifting lighter is effective. So if you look at the bigger studies or meta-analyses, then you can see that, again, they agree that lifting above 70% of your 1 repetition max is beneficial. And so this needs to be done over a long period of time. Of course, if you're completely new to training, you're 60 years old, you've never been to the gym, you're not going to go in and start lifting 70% or plus of your 1 repetition max. If someone's coming to me as a personal trainer wanting to work on their bone mineral density, then I will of course start off with making sure they're moving correctly, that they have the proper form and technique, and then build up to lifting more heavy, which is not a wasted amount of time. It's just getting used to training, learning how to lift correctly, and then you will bring in the bigger, heavier lifts as you go along. These lifts need to be carried out over a longer period of time. The bone adaptation will take months. So you need to be looking at doing at least 7 to 9 months of training according to the scientific studies. However, I would advise you, once you've started training, don't ever stop. You will feel so much better and you will want to carry on, and it will be beneficial to keep building that bone density that you really, really need to keep you independent for longer. Again, bones, not that interesting, you can't see them, but they could potentially save your life if you do have a fall later on. Okay, reason number 4, we're going to talk about metabolism. So I mentioned that your insulin resistance will rise as you get older and going through perimenopause and the menopause. So how do you make yourself more insulin sensitive? You can lift heavy weights again. So there actually is a podcast dedicated to metabolism where I talk more about insulin sensitivity and the role of lifting in creating more insulin sensitivity. So you can go and listen to that one and learn a bit more about how your metabolism works. But if you're asking your muscles to do heavy lifts, they're going to be using up the energy that you're putting into your body rather than storing it here where you don't want it. So much better in terms of boosting your metabolism in the long term and again keeping you nice and healthy in the long term. Okay, reason 5. So this one doesn't link directly to your physical health. However, there is an indirect link because it's highly linked to your mental health. So this is something I really see with experience. There are probably studies on this, but I haven't actually looked into those. This is just from personal experience because I do train a lot of women over 35 and women who have never set foot in the gym in their life. And the one thing they say to me is, Frankie, I feel so much more confident since I've been lifting. So it's really interesting. So the way I look at it is, if you're lifting light weights, you're staying in your comfort zone because you know you can do it. And a lot of the time when I'm coaching someone or in a class environment and I want to encourage them to lift heavier, it's because I know they can do it, but they don't know they can do it. So they're like, right, I'm going to have to push out of my comfort zone to see if I can do this. And so you're potentially going to fail. If you keep confronting this potential failure, then you build that confidence because you realize, oh, actually, I can do it. I am that strong. And so people say to me that, they go into work and they just feel they have this newfound confidence. They'll turn up to a meeting, they have to present something. They may have been more anxious in previous months, but having done the weight training, they just feel that extra confidence and power that they didn't have before. So another aspect when going through perimenopause and menopause will be potentially becoming more anxious and feeling more scared. So if you're weight training, then you're also working on your mental health, which is going to have an impact on your physical health and the balance that you have overall. So that is another reason that you should try to lift heavy. So with that information, now you're convinced. You're like, okay, Frankie, I'm convinced I'm going to start lifting heavy. Where do I start? Okay, so if you are someone who has never set foot in the gym, I really advise you to try and work with a personal trainer to start with, or try and find a local boot camp, perhaps a cross-training class, something where you will be learning to lift. If I have someone new coming to a bootcamp class, of course, I will start by checking their movements, making sure they've got the right technique and form before I start getting them to lift heavy. The same thing if I've got someone that's coming to me for personal training and they've never lifted weights before in their life. So you will need to start with lighter weights. Also, if you have come away from injury, again, you've got to really start with lighter weights, making sure you build up slowly. But that's the case for everyone. Often we try and go too fast, and that's where you get injuries. So you've got to build it up slowly, take the time, and you will see that strength progress as you go along. If you're with a personal trainer, it will be easier because they'll be able to check your form and technique and give you the cues that you need to make sure you're really using all of your core strength for those heavy lifts. In terms of how often you should be training, the studies show mostly that 3 times a week is optimal. So 3 times a week doesn't seem like much. However, if you throw in job kids, school drop-offs, activities on the weekends, of course, 3 times in the gym may not feel possible for you right now. If you can only do once, go once, okay? If you can do 3 times, 20 minutes, that's great. If you can do 3 times, 45 minutes, that's even better. But 3 times a week will be really effective, and you want to put that over a long-term period of time. So if you think, okay, I'm not going to manage 3 times a week yet, but I could start off with once a week and I'll be consistent, then do that, okay? You want to be looking at lifting, so like I've said, around 70% of your 1 repetition max once you have learned to lift. Looking for moderate to high intensity, so perhaps anywhere up to 8 repetitions and 3 or 4 sets on your lifts. There's a lot to learn in weight training, which is why I still encourage to hire a personal trainer, even if it's just for a couple of months to learn the ropes and understand how training works. If you are used to training, but you're not sure if you're lifting heavy enough, then the test to do is to see if your last 2 or 3 reps of your set are really hard with correct form, but you're feeling like they're really difficult and require a lot of energy and concentration. That means you're lifting heavy enough. If it's not the case, then build up slowly, try and lift heavier. So a lot of women are fearful of lifting heavy also because they're worried about getting bulky. To get bulky, you need to spend lots of time in the gym. So more time than you probably have. And as you're getting older, you're less likely to be able to develop as much muscle mass. So consider lifting heavy as a really good way to get toned and to just look a little bit more athletic. But beyond the way you look, what's important for your long-term health? Often I think we focus too much on the aesthetic, how we look. What we don't focus on is how I'm going to feel, how much stronger my body's going to be, what I'm going to be able to do that I couldn't do before. And that's what's really important. So you're not going to get bulky by doing a couple of sessions of heavy lifting a week. You're just going to look a little bit more toned, and you're going to feel loads better for it. So with all that said, I really hope that I have convinced you today to start lifting heavy. And if you have any question, tu peux couper. If the only way you can get exercise is with your small dumbbells at home, then carry on doing it. Maybe invest in a pair of heavier dumbbells. So the benefits of heavy lifting are really linked to old age and fighting against the effects of aging on the body. So please don't be disheartened if you're not lifting heavy. Just decide to make a change, okay? Shift to strong and start lifting today. Thank you for listening.